It's Friday, time for another fun size art lesson. Palette knives! My friend Cheese is learning some new paint mediums and asked me to cover this topic. Yes. This video is in no way exhaustive, but today I'm going to cover some of the most common types and usages of palette knives. They make great cat scratchers too.
The primary purpose of a palette knife is to mix paint. If I need to just add a tiny bit of one color to another for a subtle color shift, I'll just do it with my brush. But if you're mixing any significant amount of paint, you really should use a palette knife instead of your brush. Whether oil, acrylic, jelly gouache, or any other sort of thick paint medium, mixing with your brush will end up pushing paint deep into the bristles of your brush. That paint is difficult to get out and will ultimately cause your brush to fray and become misshapen. Spare your brushes from a frayed fate and mix with a palette knife. When I need just a teeny tiny bit of paint out of a tube instead of a big glob, I use a palette knife. If a glob of paint has dried on my palette, I use a palette knife to cut it open and get to the wet paint inside. Palette knives are also super helpful when scooping out thick paint mediums. And conversely, scraping them up and scooping them back in if you get too much. Way easier than a spoon. When opening a water paper block, a palette knife is a must. The edges are firmly glued down all the way around, including this top protective sheet of this Arches block. You have to slide the palette knife in this little opening and work it all the way around to release the paper. If you try to just peel the paper up, you will destroy the paper. Just trust me. I took a recent field trip to my favorite art store, Plaza Art. The number of available palette knives is enormous, made to fit every possible purpose, size, need, and budget. Previously, I've had mostly plastic palette knives. As they break, I'm trying to replace them with metal, both in an effort to get something longer lasting as well as buy less plastic. This palette knife is a pretty new style made by Gamblin. It has a birchwood handle and a one-piece blade, making it really sturdy. It is definitely a bit more expensive than other available palette knives, but the ergonomic design really is more comfortable and could be a helpful investment for artists with arthritis or in need of adaptive tools. Palette knives, whether plastic or metal, generally have a bit of bend to them, so you can mix, smush, and scrape the paint however you need to. Palette knives can also be used for painting with or instead of brushes. Lots of painters will use palette knives to drag paint across their canvas for a certain effect, or to glob on thick layers of paint, or to cut through paint to get a thin, sharp line. Cleaning paint off a palette knife is also considerably easier than cleaning your paintbrush. The best time to clean it is when the paint is still wet and you can easily wipe the paint off with a towel. However, even if the paint has been dried on for months, it scrapes off pretty quickly with a razor blade.
One very important palette knife that I have in my studio that I didn't just show, that actually never, ever, ever touches paint in my studio, but it's one of my favorites. It's my peanut butter snacking palette knife. Let me know what other sort of fun size art lessons you would like to see. I'm happy to help. Have a great weekend and happy painting.